Vera Zalka, who is also going to be starting this session we have. So please, Vera, present yourself and then you can also start.
Yes, so my name is Vera Zalka. I'm from Hungary. I'm also the comrade of Peter. We both work in the Attac Hungary. I also participate in the work of the Karl Marx Society. We are activists of the Hungarian Social Forum. We are in connection with the European Social Forum activists, and we watch the work and are solidary with the work of the World Social Forum. We also are in the peace movements, so our organizations, whatever comes to the peace movements, we also participate in those fields as well. So today I greet all the participants of the today starting protest week dedicated to an alternative answer to the world order. We think of our different world order and our demands to the contrary to the Foreign Affairs Minister's ideas and worldviews and political, economic, military actions, what they suggest. So we think absolutely the contrary, and we want to make a voice to this. We say another world is possible. We have to face the fact we are experiencing and think what we can do against it. We speak about the differences, the gap between North and South. There is also a gap between West and East Europe, and it is pretty problematic. I would like to start with, in my country, namely in Hungary, the historical introspection has not been done. We heard that this work, this exercise has been done in Germany. The German friends can report us to what extent, with which success or deficiencies. Unfortunately, in Hungary, we didn't do this exercise. There were so many system changes and a lot of lost, failed wars and revolutions in our history that it is a very difficult to be honest and admit what was the role of Hungary, many Hungarian citizens in the Second World War. It was or kept in silence what happened, or various or the barriers of are remembered who died and also are considered patriotic heroes who protected and fought for the homeland. Because of the losses, of the pain of the population or near family members, they are not ready, the people, the Hungarian citizens are not ready to see the contradictions that one cannot fight for the homeland 1,000 kilometers far from it. This happened to average Hungarian civilians who became soldiers, who were forced and without objection had to travel and fight for the interest of the powerful. Political regimes, as the Horthy regime from 1919 to 45, later, at the later period, the Arrow-Cross-Szálasi regime played with citizens as if they were game-led soldiers on a maquette battlefield. The ideology was nationalism propaganda above all. in the interest of the majority of the people, the well-being of masses of people was not a point in their revisionist, anti-communist, anti-Semitic, anti-racist war of the Second World War. In the First World War was not the Hungarian people's interest. The Trianon Treaty was unfair for Hungarians. Families, villages, regions were divided in an illogical way. So the First and Second World War was in the interest of the wealthy, of the powerful, and not of the ordinary people who were taken to the battlefield. Unfortunately, this happens today in our neighboring country, in Ukraine. Ordinary people are taken to the battlefield and are killed there. Many people have to leave their country. The historical tragedy is repeated. Again, the division of the world, the territory, the trade, the business are in the foreground. Interpretation of the end of the Second World War in my country, there were three interpretations. There were people who were liberated by the Red Army. There were soldiers of the Hungarian Second World War Army arrested or killed by the Red Army. The country had to pay reparation funds to the Soviet Union, and there was the so-called Malenki robot work camps to the Soviet Union where people were taken there for work. Unfortunately, not only those who fought on the bad side, but any Hungarian citizen could be taken there. In between 1948 and 89, there was the stress on the first point. So from the 3 points on the first. Second points were not mentioned or talked about it as those joined the fascists. It was said that those who joined the fascists, they deserved the punishment. The population in their hearts and in their thoughts, because of their family losses, kept silent, but couldn't agree with this division. Whose relatives had to fight on the wrong side, couldn't accept the loss and in addition the punishment. That is what for decades lived in the souls and minds of the people. After the anti-communist revolt of 1989, all these repressed thoughts and feelings came to surface in the name of freedom of speech and in the name of liberty and so forth. From the liberal and conservative side of the society, a new history narrative appeared at the very beginning of 89. All school books were written according to the winners of the 89 revolt. In the beginning, there was a scale of rewriting of the history. The approach of anti-communism of Ronald Reagan was welcomed. It was not in fashion to contradict with the new old views. In 1989 to 2010, there were various interpretations. There was introduced a new symbolic remembrance politics. Statues were removed from the capital, the big cities, the villages, from everywhere to the so-called Statue Park Museum. There was a big wave of renaming of streets. History books rewritten several times, history programs in the TV, periodicals, and newspapers. all the national days were noted in the new era. After 2010, Orbán Viktor decided to uniformize the content of the school books. No book choice anymore, no teachers and parents' choice. In these new books, our fellow friends, history teachers, professors have made a study how the history falsification pollutes the soul and minds of the new generation and all in the country according to Goebbels type propaganda. This year, this is what I must tell you, what's happening in our country according to history falsification. And the other theme, what I have to mention, that Budapest is the only capital, the only city in Europe that allows fascist troops to march in the city and commemorate fascist heroes, their heroes. This year, on February 11, again, in the capital of Hungary, gathered together the Nazi-fascist troops of Europe. They are welcomed by the Hungarian Nazi followers. The Hungarian government is not effective and clear in regulating them, as all over Europe this happens. That is a silent support from their part. The blaming of anti-fascist movement was the greatest news after this day this year. Anti-fascists every year have a protest because what is illegal in every European country, EU countries, it should be illegal in Hungary too. Hungary is the only country, Budapest is the only capital that allows this. Now they stepped forward a new step. Fidesz parliament member Kocsis Máté and others from Fidesz used the anti-fascist protests to criminalize the participants of the demonstration, also to attack member of parliament of Sikra movement. So they made a 2-3 weeks, almost 1 month attack in Facebook, periodicals, and so forth in this speech in the parliament. Also, they arrested in her home a Sikra member woman who they kept her in prison for 2 weeks. All was false, all was a lie. Sikra movement gave out a press release about this. You can receive it from Tor because I have sent him. So there are 2 materials you can study, this press release and also the Budapest Appeal of last year. The Hungarian official way of relativization of history, unfortunately, is the same way as it is in the House of European History in Brussels. We, the Hungarian anti-fascists, anti-racists, protest against the internal and the EU falsification of history. The Hungarian government would like to make smaller the role of the Hungarian government under the Second World War in the mass killing. They want to put the responsibility on the German side. Thank you for your attention. I thought it was important to show you what is going on in this theme in Hungary, because my Western friends and activist friends always complain that they don't know too much about the Eastern countries, how the majority of the population thinks, how they are influenced with anti-racist and anti-Semitic and other thoughts, history falsification thoughts. So I thought this is important to talk about this. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Vera. I'm trying to find, the problem is that the material from, how do you pronounce Sikra?
Sikra.
Sikra is a PDF file, and I don't for sure if I can put it on in the chat. I will try. There are some very disgusting anti-Semitic cartoons used against the leader of the Shikra movement.
Yes, that's terrible.
He's in the parliament, isn't it so?
Yes, he's a member of parliament, yes.
So it has really some sort of anti-Semitic tone to it all. And I remember when I prepared the European Social Forum in Malmö 2008, many years ago, I met with young activists in Budapest. And they told me that being young and leftist in Hungary was very hard. And they got phone calls saying, we will kill you twice. First, because you're a communist, and second, because you are a Jew, which is precisely according to the Nazi ideology against Judeo-Bolshevism. But that it's so sort of still there in a country, the only country, as far as I know, in all of Eastern European Union, where many Jews survived. In more or less all the other countries, or actually all the other countries, there are only some thousands left, below 10,000. But as far as I understand, there are some 100,000 in Hungary. And that this kind of anti-Semitism is still so virulent, it's really worrisome. Is there any questions now? You can put it in the chat if you don't. Do anyone have any question? It seemed like I was correct, Peter and Vera, about the numbers of Jews in different Eastern European countries, more or less.
More or less 4,100 Jewish was liquidated, and more, near 1 million in the struggle at the Volga region, Hungarian soldiers.
Péter, ki élte túl, hányan élték túl zsidó lakosság? 100 000
Ja.
van?
Oh, I don't know exactly how many survived. I don't know.
The number of survivors, we have to look after it, but we have Jewish communities in Budapest. We have their cultural house, theater. So there is a lively Jewish community in Budapest, but there are such cities where we're Jewish and none are left. None are left.
In countryside, almost all Jews was liquidated.
From the countryside.
From the countryside.
Yes.
It was not enough time to
send the Budapest Jewish
people. Yes.
Yes. The Budapest Jewish people were gathered and they had to live in ghettos. And those remained who lived in the ghettos. And of course, very few remained from the concentration camps from abroad and who returned. But mainly the Budapest Jewish ghetto people remained. But from the countryside, it is really horrible, because we heard programs in the radio that Kalocsa and other cities, there were numerous Jewish communities, and all of them were liquidated.
Yeah.
So the capital is an exception, and the countryside, that's really horrible.
Well, it seems like it worked. This is the press kit from this movement in Hungary who has been attacked. Press kit from Zalka with this because they were protesting against this European fascist meeting in Budapest. And I think there are some of these caricatures in that press kit.
Yes, there is. I checked also. Yes.
Yeah. So I would propose that we continue with Leo Gabriel's intervention, and then we have some time to discuss how come that it's so hard to address this issue. Why is it so problematic? So, dear Leo, the floor is yours.
Thank you. It was very interesting to have these historic reflections on Hungarian history. I want to go one step further or deeper by asking myself the question, how does it come? What mental acrobacies make it that distortion nowadays happen more than in other periods, I think. You must know, for what I'm going to say, I'm the son of a quite renowned philosopher, Christian philosopher, who participated in dialogue during the 70s very actively between Christianism and Marxism. And one of his books is called Die Logik der Weltanschauung. The logic, it's hard to translate Weltanschauung, the vision of the world, something like the logic of ideologies. And he starts in his reflection by saying that the 19th century was a period where thought tried to grasp reality, or in a way that thought becomes identically with reality, which is, of course, is an illusion. But there is this dialectical thinking we find in Hegel and others to achieve what he calls, Hegel, the concrete notion, that by this dialectical movement you finally end up with having a trustworthy reflection of reality. Nowadays, and not only nowadays, it has happened since some time, this effort to grasp reality through notions, through thought, has been substituted by images and by beliefs. You don't care anymore whether it's logic or not logic, but you quite simply paint, like I have seen in the Maidan. They were selling this picture of Putin with the Hitler mustache, and no reflection was made on that. Why? And this comparison with Hitler and Putin, because the image is a very treacherous instrument. I'm also a filmmaker, and I know very much that a difference from writing you can cheat a lot more through images. And it looks like reality because the images are something like you can see, and it looks like reality. But the way you edit it, the way you present this image is already a logical background, or an illogical background. The Mexican famous poet Octavio Paz has said once, our biggest illusion is that when we write, we are reproducing the original. You never reproduce an original in writing, he says. That's why history is always a copy, he said. And now, what is this copy looking like nowadays, a difference from other centuries or times? And for that, I want to give you an example. One of our very good friends in the European Social Forum and in the Prague Spring 2 network is a journalist and political writer called Algirdas Paleckis, and he has made the effort to go into a single event which happened in 1990, if I recall, back when Gorbachev was glasnost and perestroika was at its peak, and there was a big demonstration in Vilnius, and according to the interpretation that happened afterwards of this, they were saying right away, this massacre, because there were about 40-50 people killed, this massacre is a massacre done by under the orders of Gorbachev. It seemed, when I heard that at the time, I remember it very well, this when it was in the newspapers, it doesn't somehow fit to the image of Gorbachev to have this make a massacre. And so, and Algirdas reconstructed piece by piece. There was a television tower, and people going up the television tower, and they were shooting at the masses from above, and so on. And he found out that these people who physically produced the massacres were part of the nationalists in Lithuania, who wanted to stage this in order to make a sort of a false reproduction, which is in the meantime, not only in wartime, but especially in wartime. We can see that now, when, for instance, now the drone attack on the Kremlin was happening, immediately all the newspapers in my country are full of immediately, yes, this was done by the Russians, in order to promote a strong reaction against this. Something similar is happening in Zaporizhia every day, which is controlled by the Russians and under attack, in a very dangerous attack, because it could produce a nuclear catastrophe. But the interpretation is another one, that the Russians killed their own soldiers in order to say that it were the others. So this is what I would say a handicapped or a distorted, very distorted way of reproducing the dialectics, not anymore to get to the truth, but to get to the image which you have already had in your head. And that is very dangerous. We could observe that in many wars. I know, for instance, in Colombia, in Latin America, in Colombia, this was the systematic strategy of the army and of the mercenaries who are there in order to increase the bad image about communists, about guerrillas, and all of that. So the question is, how can we react to this? This is, I think, the important question. Because truth alone is not enough. The weapons these populists have from the extreme right and from the right in the meantime, they are really very successful in doing so. Otherwise, we wouldn't speak about that today. And I think we have to enter the game. It's my hypothesis, if you want. Not only denouncing that this has been false and so on, but we have on our side to create images which are capable to counteract these distorted images. That's to say, if we are talking about rewriting history, we shouldn't leave to them the rewriting of history, but it is very important, and that's why I liked so much what Vera said. We have to go back to the roots and create images to counteract the false we are confronted every day. But that means a big effort. It means a media effort. And there are in cinema, you have many of the younger directors who are going back to the realities and forge an image of that. I mean, for instance, I can remember a movie I saw by Oliver Stone called The Little History of the United States of America. Well, this little history, it lasts about 8 hours, and in in a film, and there he somehow managed to get a documentary material of the time of Gorbachev about the negotiation, where it became evident not only a talk, but really an image, a correct image of what has happened during the conversations with Reagan when they talked, for instance, about the expansion of prohibition, like the Russians said, of the expansion of NATO to the Eastern world. That nowadays many people doubt about that has happened. There is no treaty and so on. But there are images which can prove that. That is one of the suggestions, perhaps because I'm a filmmaker, that comes into my mind, which could be very effective, but also other forms of art. Kemal is told that he is very much in the arts sector. I think this is far more important than to have long speeches or which nobody listens to anymore, to really reproduce in a subjective way the reality of the past, and that is to counteract the fantasies of the rewriters of history. Thank you very much for your attention. You are muted, Thors.
Thank you, both of you. This became a much more advanced discussion than I had hoped for, addressing a sort of 4 ways of communicating and asking what happens in a society where notions are replaced with images and what can be done in that case. Together with this very concrete story about that in a country where more Jews survive than in any other Eastern European EU country, the 1930s attack against Judo-Bolshevism, connecting antisemitism with anything that is left. And I suppose Shikra is not really a communist group. I suppose it's a young leftist group, as far as I understand. Is that so? Yeah. So it's still sort of virulent, and that is really then interesting. Of course, I would say Russia is using these images as well. There are quite a few reports about how they do it. Seldom I see them. It's claimed that there are, but there was one, for instance, with a crucified boy. In 2014 was presented as if Ukrainians were crucifying children, which is sort of a very classical way of creating an enemy. It was used by the British during the First World War. They claimed that German troops cut the hands out of small babies and so on. And we've seen it in anti-Semitic pictures for hundreds and hundreds of years. So that was the starting point. I would say it would be interesting. We have only a quarter of an hour left, but especially those who are listening into it. And now we have a new guest as well, Sharon. Is there any of you who has any question or any comment? Okay, Peter.
I checked at the internet that in Hungary, at the actual territory of Hungary. Before the Second World War, it was 4,100 Jews, and the survivors was 150,000 around, or a little bit more, but this means 2/3 of Jews was liquidated.
Yeah, yeah. So anyway, Hungary, in spite of this,
That's my family too.
oh yeah,
My grandfathers and
Talking
some
about the victims of nowadays,
relatives.
I forgot to tell the end of the story of Algirdas Bialeckis. He has been condemned to 6 years of prison just because of his research he has made.
I would say it's interesting also then how, if we are faced with a populist, in a bad sense, a way of using images, where sort of the traditional way of building logical arguments and notions are swept aside, how can it then be confronted? And I think this Budapest Appeal, which was signed by 19 Hungarian organizations, both Attac Hungary and then some organizations for survivors and so on, is interesting because it criticizes the way the European Union uses history writing, claiming that Soviet and Nazi Germany is equally genocidal, which I would say is a way of relativizing the Holocaust. Of course, we all know that Soviet Union was used terror and mass murder, but that is not specific for Soviet Union. This is what the British Empire did exactly in the same period. There's estimations that 3 million Indian people in India died in 1942 because of this kind of forced starvation, which took place, as we know, in Kazakhstan, southern Russia, and Ukraine also. So it's no question about that there was terror in other countries than Nazi Germany, but the specific during this time period of extermination of a whole ethnic population, or how we defined it, that is very specific. And when you then say that, no, this distinction is not there, and the British and the Western Europeans are totally sort of innocent with some few exceptions that coincidentally happens, then you have a problem. And I looked into the images here. There is an exhibition made by the Nazi German party in 1938. Nationalsozialistisches Deutsche Arbeiterpartei. And this was touring all around Germany, and it was based on a fascist exhibition from Italy, where the whole thing was to present how you had heroes dying in the struggle against the Reds in Italy and in Germany. And the whole ideology was to destroy Judeo-Bolshevism. So you could see it in the images, because the main enemy was a red soldier. And in his symbol, it had a red star, which was the communist symbol, and above it, or around it actually, the David star. So by the image, you connect Jews with communism, and they are the same. What happens now is the opposite. You disconnect this. In reality, Nazi German strategy to kill 30 million Soviet Union citizens, which was a sort of plan, and executed. 27 million died. And also killing all the Jews, which was also executed, we know. 6 million, of course, figures is maybe not totally exact all the time, none of them, but we know that these are the proportions. There's no question about that. And what they know is to disconnect them and claiming that actually the only thing that the Nazi Germany was killing was Jews and Roma people. But they were never really actually having a plan to kill 30 million Soviet Union members. They didn't have a plan to destroy the Soviet Union. So they disconnected, and now we can see in the symbols of the European Union project that they connect them again. But now they connect Nazi Germany with Soviet Union. So the swastika is combined with the communist symbol. So they use this imagery which you talk about. And I would say here is really a key for trying to, how can we with images start to discuss with and sort of be able to connect again instead of accepting this connection. And I think here many have made a very wrong mistake that they claim, no, we are not anti-Semitic because we are only anti-Zionist. And that is, of course, one way of arguing, but it's a mistake because you can never, that means that you accept this disconnection of the Nazi Germany with that they actually also were against the whole notion that we have to have social justice, that there are different classes in a society. That was the core of the fascist. It was not only racist, it was against the workers' movement. But by disconnecting the anti-racism of the Nazis with that it actually was also against the popular movements, it was actually not only workers' movement, it was also the farmers' movement. So they are, you retreat and retreat. So I would say that this is an ideology and an imagery which is at the core of what now Josep Borrell are saying. Europe is a garden and the rest of the world is a jungle threatening to invade us. So here we have very clear images again. And the problem we have that kind of EU philosophy makes it impossible to cooperate with the rest of the world, because you are claiming that we are always the good ones and out there are you the dangerous ones. So here we see sort of course, a reaction from the global majority, and how to connect with that would be important. Is there any more comments? Yeah, Leo.
Just following up my real preoccupation, my real what can we do, or how can politics be conceived? One thing is the counter images, but I'm now thinking about, in order not always talk about sad things, about a positive, not only image, but positive reality. Austria is a very conservative country where for decades, I think since the 50s, the Communist Party never made it into parliament. They most of the time had less than 1% of the electorate. And now all of a sudden, something happened nobody expected. In Graz, which is the second numerous city of Austria, the mayor is a communist. In Salzburg, you know, Salzburg is a bourgeois environmental festival of Salzburg, and it's nearly the nobility of Austria joined. The candidate of the Communist Party has made it to the second force, political force of Salzburg. And now even we have a dispute about the leadership in the Social Democrats, and everybody, the official party, also Social Democratic Party, but much more the Christian Democrats, they thought that we will go a little bit to the right in with regard to the migrants and to exclude them and so on. Whilst they were doing that, a relatively young mayor on the communal level, or in a city where there is the biggest refugee camp, which has been constructed for 400 people, and now there are 4,000. And he managed not only to solve this problem, logistic problem, but he was winning the elections with 80%. Why does that happen? Because people are so sick of these false images we are produced, and if somebody in a direct, honest way is participating in the struggles from below and showing the understanding and so on, if the truth is not only something written, the truth is people can feel if somebody is true or not. People are not that stupid. I mean, if we can manage to get again to the ground, and let's leave a little bit the superstructures, we can have success with what we are doing to counteract these false images.
That was a wonderful last notion, and we have to sum up, but I would give Vera the last word.
I'm very happy Leo mentioned this, and the Sikra people, these young people, have connections with Graz, and now in this Salzburg campaign there were 2 Sikra young people invited, and they participated in the work of the campaign, so they joined the campaigners. And just last week we had heard the report from them, how it went on, what we can study from them. So there are building new connections within the European youth organizations, young people. So this is also positive, and that's true that people have enough of the false manipulative informations that are thrown to their heads.
Great. You wanted to say no? Okay. I think it's we had said that we should have 1 hour, and it is now like that. This brought really new light to our discussions, and it was what we see is that we need to continue this. hopefully better prepared than this time, because we've been very late in announcing this webinar. But I do hope that there is a growing concern now when more and more people see that all the struggles are connected. The environment is not separate from social justice. The peace is not separated from social justice and environment. And I can also end up with a small positive notion. On Saturday, all the main climate movements, which include the churches, the trade unions, and broad networks uniting everyone concerned about climate in Sweden, gathered at the Saturday. And before in Sweden, it's been so that any notion about peace has been excluded from the broad climate movement. And we were discussing now to have a consensus paper, and as everybody knows, when you have a consensus, it's more or less impossible to bring in anything new. I tried to claim that it is important with disarmament for environment and welfare. And the immediate reaction in the working group where we discussed this part of the common statement, the reaction was, that is horrible. That is to be pro-Putin. And this message had been brought by the chairperson of the Swedish Peace and Arbitration Society to the audience, which is the oldest peace organization on earth, still active. And in spite of that, she's very sort of not at all any pro-Russian or anything. This was very much the sentiment. We were not allowed to say disarmament. And then the discussion went on and went on. And it had the focus on this because it was the only conflictual issue. Then it was possible, then somebody said, we are not supposed to say anything against something. It should be all be very peaceful. And suddenly the idea of peaceful mind came into the document, which was, of course, a good step forward. And then suddenly also common security, which is a concept which actually can include both climate and military concern. And finally also disarmament. Because when I said, no, I'm not agreeing, I will put into the protocol that I don't agree with cutting out disarmament, the Christian priest at the meeting directly said, I support it, I will sign it as well. And then sort of the sentiment shifted. So with other words, even at broad climate things, suddenly one starts to understand that we can connect the issues. And creating an image of that actually peace on earth and peace with earth is something that everybody actually wants. So thank you very much, and hope that we can continue our efforts. And I see a thumb up from Sharon Gustafsson. Thank you, Sharon. And I hope that also our participants, as you can see in the chat, Matthias has contributed. He could not speak here, but he has contributed to the discussion. And Ingela also thinks this was good. So we had an active audience, and without you who came in like this, we would have felt very alone. But because of Ingela, Matthias, and Sharon were present, and Peter and Kemal, we are much pleased. So thank you for the fantastic preparations by Leo and Vera, and thank you all of us.